In the early morning hours of August 30th, 2013, California Highway Patrol officers discovered the damaged remains of a car near Castaic Lake in the mountains northwest of Los Angeles. The car, they soon learned, belonged to a 19-year-old by the name of Bryce Laspisa, who was mysteriously missing from the scene. Meanwhile, back in his hometown of Laguna Niguel, 100 miles south, Bryce's parents Michael and Karen were awaiting their son's arrival home from college. Karen had last heard from Bryce around 2 a.m. that morning, when he called her to let her know that he was pulling off to the side of Interstate 5 up in the Sierra Pelona Mountains. Bryce told his mother that he was too tired to drive anymore and would get some sleep before making the rest of the journey home in the morning. But when the morning came, there was no sign of Bryce. Finally, a knock came at the door, and the Laspisas were ready to greet their son. Instead, they were met by an officer from the California Highway Patrol who informed them that they had found Bryce's car. The rear window was shattered, and his phone, laptop, and wallet were all inside. Yet Bryce himself was nowhere to be found. Suddenly, the strangeness of the past 24 hours dawned on the Laspisas. At around 11 a.m. the day before, Michael and Karen discovered that their son had just used their insurance to call for roadside assistance while driving home from Sierra College, north of Sacramento. Bryce's car had apparently run out of fuel, so he used his insurance and called a local service station owner to deliver 3 gallons of gasoline to him around 9 a.m. A few hours later, however, Bryce, for some reason, still hadn't driven away. His parents, concerned about the insurance notification, called the service station owner and asked them to go back and check on Bryce. But when he did, at around 3 p.m., he found Bryce in the exact same spot. He then convinced Bryce to get a move on and drive the remaining 3 hours home to his parents' house. But a few hours passed after that, and Bryce Laspisa still wasn't home. In fact, he only made it a few miles down the road, where police found him by tracking his phone. That they let Bryce know that his parents were concerned and convinced him to give them a call. They noted that he seemed lucid and friendly, showing no signs of intoxication, and that no drugs or alcohol were found in the car. Finally, after some urging, Bryce was back on the I-5 and headed home. Then came that 2 a.m. phone call when Bryce told his mother that he'd pull off the road to sleep. Security camera footage captured 15 minutes later did show Bryce pulling his car off the highway and onto an access road. But from there, no one knows where he went or what happened.
Divers dredged Castaic Lake and found no trace of him. Police dogs tracked his scent across a bridge to a nearby truck stop, but then the trail went cold. To this day, the mystery of what happened to Bryce Laspisa remains unsolved.
You're listening to History Uncovered, brought to you by the digital publisher All That's Interesting, where we explore the uncharted corners of the natural world and the world past. I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Austin Harvey.
And I'm All That's Interesting staff writer Kalina Fraga.
And today we're exploring the disappearance of Bryce Laspisa. Yeah, second missing persons case in a row here.
Yeah.
This one is also very strange, but in a very different way from the Brandon Swanson disappearance. Yeah, so we'll get into it. There's a lot more of a behavioral kind of analysis, I think, that goes into this one comparatively. But interesting that they were both sort of the same, they were in the same place in life. They were, early college age guys. So Bryce Laspisa, he was the only son of Karen and Michael Laspisa. He was born April 30th, 1994 in Springfield, Illinois. He was, a pretty typical kid. He was very artistic. People said he was very outgoing. He made a lot of friends easily. In 2012, he graduated from Naperville Central High School, which is just outside of Chicago. And shortly after that, his parents were able to retire early, so the family moved to Laguna Niguel in Orange County, California.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a move.
Yeah.
But good for them. They were able to retire early, so that's very nice. Bryce then started going to Sierra College, so he moved away from his parents' home. He was in Roseville, a couple hours away, not very, very far. And by all accounts, his first year at college went smoothly. He was doing good. He had good grades. He had friends. He had a girlfriend. He became really good friends with his roommate, whose name is Sean Dixon. He was dating a girl named Kim Sly, and their names are important because they come back in later. When he came home for summer break, he was very optimistic and he was excited to go back to school. And then when he did, things started to get a little bit weird. During his second year, both Sean and Kim noticed subtle changes in Bryce's behavior. They said he was a lot more withdrawn and erratic and depressed, which is it happens. But he was sort of basically like self-medicating for it in a really unhealthy way. Kim later said that he confided in her that he'd started taking Vyvanse, which is an amphetamine derivative used to treat ADHD. I would know. But he didn't have ADHD. So that's bad, right? I don't know who needs to hear that, but if you're taking medication meant to treat a condition that you don't have, that's bad. Bad things can happen. You can get really bad side effects. The reason he was doing also was not a very good reason. I know that, it's very typical, I think, for maybe not very typical, but it's not unheard of that a college student would get Adderall off of somebody so they could cram or study. Again, doesn't make it better. Vyvanse is notably a lot more intense than Adderall is as well. I talked with my own psychiatrist about this a little bit ago because she was going to put me on Vyvanse for my ADHD. And she explained like this whole thing about how extended release Vyvanse actually is more effective because of whatever. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it. Point being, Vyvanse is not the, if you're going to do it, if you're going to take a amphetamine to stay up late for whatever reason, Vyvanse is significantly more intense than Adderall is. But he was doing it so he could stay up all night playing video games. So
not even to study or anything. It was just
right.
Okay.
Right. And I go on this tangent about Vyvanse because the side effects, if you're not, taking a doctor prescribed dose for a condition that you need it for, it can cause psychosis, depression, and mania. So these are some pretty serious side effects. The TV commercial would be very, like
right.
Taking Vyvanse without your doctor's permission could cause severe psychosis, depression, and mania. Please check with your medical professional before beginning, whatever.
Yeah, pretty severe symptoms.
Right. And then it gets worse because his roommate, Sean, also noted that Bryce started drinking liquor like very heavily, which when you combine that with Vyvanse is also very bad.
Yeah. One's like an upper and one's a downer, right?
One's an upper, one's a downer. There's a lot of like, if you're on like Vyvanse or Adderall and you're drinking, you don't notice yourself getting as drunk because you're having this upper. So what happens is people a lot of the time will take Adderall, if they're going to go party and they want to party all night, they take Adderall and they start drinking and they don't realize how drunk they are, which can be very dangerous for many reasons.
Yeah.
But Sean said that Bryce was drinking sometimes as much as 2/5 in a single weekend, which is
a lot.
A lot. And then out of nowhere, he broke up with his girlfriend, basically sending her this very self-deprecating message where he said she'd be better off without him. Around that same time, he texted his roommate this kind of like unusually heartfelt message where he said, "I love you, bro. Seriously, you were the best person I've ever met. You saved my soul." And I think it's a very sweet message to send, but it's not typically the message two guy friends send each other.
Yeah.
Then he started giving away personal belongings of his. He gave away like a pair of diamond earrings that his mother had given him. He gave away his Xbox, which is strange because then why are you taking the Vyvanse? That was the point.
Yeah, that sounds like very suicidal kind of behavior.
Yeah, it's very like last bequeathments or something.
Yeah, giving away objects, saying goodbyes. I think that's usually indicative or can be indicative of like someone.
Right. And if he was feeling very depressed, I mean, it does seem like that's the direction this is heading. And his friends picked up on that as well. So Sean calls Bryce's mother and basically tells her, "Hey, your son's acting kind of weird." And this didn't take long. This is only August 28th when this phone call happens. So they're like a couple weeks into their sophomore year at this point. Maybe like a few days.
Not even like a days. Yeah, I would think.
You'd start college like the last week of August. So
yeah.
So this is like pretty immediate. As soon as he gets back, things are not good. Bryce also called his mom that same night. He was at Kim's apartment because she took his keys because she was worried about him. Karen then convinced Kim to give Bryce his keys back so he could go to his own apartment and just get some sleep. And then she, on the phone, said, "Hey, do you want me to fly out? Is something going on? Do you need me to come out there and see you?" And he said, "No, we'll talk tomorrow." He told her, quote, "I have a lot to talk to you about." And this is kind of where things ramp up and start getting very weird. At 1 a.m. on August 29th, so, a few hours after that phone call, Bryce called his mom again. She assumed at that point that he was back in his apartment, but that was not the case. She didn't know where he was at the time. They looked back now. Phone records show that he was an hour's drive south of Rockland. And basically on his way, it seemed, back to his parents' house. Karen has no idea. She has no clue that this is where he is at this point in time. And then 10 hours later, the Laspisas got a notification that Bryce had used their insurance's roadside assistance service. And they were like, what? How? Why? They were able to contact I guess they were able to see the information of the guy who went out to meet Bryce. So they contacted this mechanic. His name was Christian. I don't know his last name. It's not listed anywhere. They just called him Christian. He owned Castro Tire and Gas in the nearby town. He told them that Bryce had run out of fuel near Buttonwillow and that he went out and delivered 3 gallons of gasoline to Bryce. But this was like, they didn't live that far away. They were like 3 hours maybe. So the fact that Bryce still wasn't home 10 hours after they last talked to him was a point of concern.
Yeah.
And they expressed that to Christian on the phone. And he was like, well, let me go see if Bryce is still there. I'll drive back out to the spot where I found him. And when he did, Bryce was still there. He was like maybe a few miles down the road, but he really hadn't moved for hours.
Gosh. Sounds like he's having like a psychotic break or something.
That's kind of, yeah. Right. I'll get into it.
I figured.
Yeah, Bryce hadn't moved for hours. Christian's on the phone with Bryce's parents, and he and his parents convinced Bryce at this point. They were like, you gotta just drive home, man. Go see your parents. It was a 3-hour drive from where he was found. More time passes, hours, and they still don't hear from Bryce. He's still not home. So then they called the police and they were like, can you go check on our son? Like, this is like a wellness check, or a welfare check. We don't know what's going on with him. Police tracked his phone. They found him just a few miles from where Christian had found him. And they said at the time that he seemed lucid and acted very friendly. They didn't find any drugs or alcohol on him or in the car. So it wasn't like he was under the influence of anything from what they could tell. But once more, they had to convince him to go back to his parents' house. And so now it's been almost 24 hours since Bryce left Kim's apartment. And around 2 a.m. on August 30th, he called his mom and said that he was too tired to keep driving, that he was going to pull over to the side of the road and then sleep until morning and then make the rest of the drive. Weirdly, security camera footage that they later gathered shows that Bryce actually turned onto an access road and didn't just pull over and start sleeping like he said he was going to. And then a few hours after that, his 2003 Toyota Highlander was found overturned near Castaic Lake.
Ugh, yikes.
His personal belongings, including his phone, his wallet, and his laptop, were left inside. He was nowhere to be found. Around 8 a.m. the next day, there was finally a knock on the Laspisa's door, and they were like, oh my God, thank God, Bryce is home. And he wasn't. It was a cop letting them know, hey, we found your son's car. We don't know where your son is.
God, what a strange 24 hours.
Yeah. Yeah. Very this happened very quickly, it seems. And that's kind of where the story ends. They conducted an extensive search of Castaic Lake. They found no traces of Bryce. They brought out police canines to track his scent. It led them to a nearby truck stop and then just went cold after that. So they assumed that he must have, after the crash, walked to this truck stop and then vanished into thin air, I guess, because there's no
gone
other
into a
sign
truck
of
or
him.
something.
Right. In 2013, they found charred remains near Castaic Lake, and they were like, oh, maybe this is him.
Yeah.
It turns out it wasn't.
Oh.
4 years after that, they found a skull near Templin Highway. Once again, they determined there was no connection to Bryce there. There are several theories. Some people say that maybe Bryce just disappeared on his own. He was just like, something was going on in his life that he was not happy with, and he vanished, and he wanted to start a new life for himself. It's certainly an interesting theory.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like he was someone. I mean, maybe, who knows? But
Yeah. Other people say maybe he got wounded or injured in the crash and just succumbed to his injuries. But again, they haven't found his body.
he was near that lake. I mean, I guess in theory, didn't he crash near a lake? Yeah.
He crashed
he
near
could
the
have
lake.
stumbled in and gotten pulled.
Right. But they
Into
never
it.
found his body in the lake.
Yeah.
I don't know how big Castaic Lake is. I guess I could look it up real quick. That we have the power of live information.
Right.
I mean, it's just like a reservoir. It's not massive. It's 330 feet deep and like
pretty deep.
3.5 miles squared.
That's pretty big.
It's pretty big, but it's not like Great Lakes sort of big, you know?
No. And people aren't usually like pulled into the water. You're usually kind of pushed
Right.
up onto shore. But I don't know. Maybe he thought maybe he was injured and he thought, I can swim. I'm going to swim. I don't know why he would do that, but
Yeah. I mean, hey, anything's possible, I guess.
yeah.
There is the theory that maybe he encountered a bad actor that night who killed him. There's really no evidence to suggest it. But sort of to get to what you were saying earlier, I think the most popular theory is that he was going through some sort of mental health crisis because of
certainly sounds like it.
drug and alcohol abuse. Maybe he had a psychotic break. Some people said that Vyvanse withdrawal caused him to spiral into like a sudden severe depression. And then the only more recent update in this case is in August of 2023, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released like an age progressed image of him, of what he would look like at 29.
Wow. Yeah, I think that some sort of psychotic break makes the most sense here just because he was acting really erratically.
Right. A lot of sudden behavioral changes and
Yeah, not just the messages to his girlfriend and his friend and giving away items, which I do think sounds suicidal,
Yeah.
but also just like this very strange drive where he keeps stopping and just sitting there. It's like he didn't know where he was.
Right. Because that doesn't read to me, and I'm not a mental health professional, but if someone were suicidal, and it doesn't seem like he would do these weird kind of like, I'm not going to drive home, I'm just going to sit here on the side of the road kind of behaviors, you know what I mean? That's just not typical with like
if you were suicidal, there might be some sort of like battle in your head about like, I should go home and see my parents and like, I'm not going to burden them with this, you know, like what should I do, back and forth. I when you were first going through the series of events and you mentioned this Christian fellow, I thought maybe he had something to do with it because it's only his testimony that he went and talked to Bryce, but then the police got involved and they also saw him.
Right.
So that sort of
Yeah,
makes that
Christian,
less likely.
by all accounts, is just a very nice, helpful man. So I don't want to hear any slander on Christian's name.
Slander
here.
against him. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It is similar to the one we covered before where there is a car accident. This young man wanders out into the night and vanishes.
Yeah.
If it's a reservoir and it's very deep, it's possible he could be walking along the edge of it somewhere and fallen in, I suppose. It's not really a lake with a shoreline.
That's true. Let me see if there's like a map of where Bryce Laspisa car crashed. Maybe if I want to see where along the lake he was.
Oh, it does have a shoreline though.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's very, very strange.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like, what could possibly have happened?
Yeah, and I guess the kind of chilling thing about the story is there is this element of like, he's lost, it's dark, he's in crisis. He walked to a truck stop apparently, like who knows who he met there. Seemingly somebody, because that's where the trail goes cold.
Right.
And that could be a bad actor for sure.
Yeah, the other interesting thing about that too is like, maybe the truck stop just didn't have security cameras.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
you'd think
truck
there'd
stop
be-
could be like
It's
something
true.
very simple.
That's true. Yeah, I guess they should really define what they mean by truck stop. Is this like a rest stop of like
Like with bathrooms and stuff.
like
and,
bathrooms and like maybe a little convenience store, or is this just kind of like one of those like emergency pullover kind of deals?
right. Yeah, I don't know.
I thought the theory about him intentionally going missing to start a new life was very interesting. I don't know how viable it is, but it's interesting.
Well, were you the one who heard the story this week about the kayaker who faked his own death?
I was, yeah, that guy.
There was an update about him this morning that I read. I'm not sure if that was included in your story or not, which I'm sorry, I did not actually read your story. But just how
I don't expect you to read every story that all of us publish.
He really went to great lengths to fake his death, to take out a life insurance policy,
right,
and to sneak off to, I think, Ukraine, or a Ukrainian woman was who he was going to see.
No, it was Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan.
That's what they theorized. It was Uzbekistan.
Wow. Well, because he's contacted the police now and been like, I'm fine. I'm like, yeah. He sent a video message. So
wow.
Yeah. It's just a really insane thing to do. So I think these are a bit different in this way, because for him, I think it's a pretty insane thing to do, to fake your death if you're leaving your wife and your children to start another life. With Bryce, if he was faking his death, it wasn't like... he
didn't have like a goal.
It seemed like more was out of a crisis mindset than like, I'm going to go meet this woman. Although I guess like, who knows? But it sounds like more he was in sort of mental health crisis. And
well, with that other guy too, they found, ultimately evidence that it was premeditated because he took out this life insurance policy, and he had lost his passport and he got it, or he said he lost his passport and got a second passport.
That's so... I guess his logic was probably like, I'm going to save my family the pain of me leaving them for someone else.
Right.
But to think that he
I'm
died
dead and missing.
Yeah, especially
I think it was also
kids.
just like, I don't know. I can't express the logic in the illogical there.
That's pretty wild.
But point being, the difference is that guy, it was very clear that he had planned this out because he was backing up photos and files, and then he cleared his hard drive, like stuff that might not have seemed suspicious at the time,
right.
And then you look back and you're like, oh, okay, wait, no, I can see where the planning element came in here. But it wasn't like Bryce Laspisa had gotten a new ID, or like there was no evidence that he like planned anything out ahead of time.
No, I mean, he was in the car that night, but like he could have stayed at Kim's, like he could have driven home. There was no real, it's a lot I think if he was trying to disappear on purpose and start a new life, he wouldn't need all those steps of like stopping and calling for help and like stopping and sitting there, and he just would have disappeared. Yeah.
And it says a lot that the people around him were very concerned about his behavior, that they were noticing these changes.
Yeah, right.
And like I said, I mean, we went over the danger of taking a lot of Vyvanse when you're not prescribed it. It can cause bits of psychosis if it fundamentally just changed his brain, like if something in him just snapped, because the police said he seemed lucid, like he wasn't in a state of panic or distress or under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Yeah, but you don't know how long they were talking to him for. It could have been like, hey buddy, you okay? Yep. Oh, all right, your mom's worried.
Right. But also, like, if he had a full-on mental break where his brain kind of became detached from reality, that might not present as like a panicked crisis. He might seem very calm and collected, but just fundamentally different.
Right. Yeah, that's really tragic though, especially because people around him like did care about him a lot, and like.
Right.
They had noticed
everyone
this
was
and wanted to
he's very
help
well-liked, smart kid.
Yeah. That's really tragic.
Yeah.
And when did he vanish?
That was 2012, 2013.
Yeah, so more than 10 years ago now.
And he would have been like a year or two older than me, about my age.
Yeah.
So
that's how those stories are always weird. They kind of bring it home when it's like, oh, they're my age. Yeah.
Sometimes we talk about stuff that's like further in the past and it's like, oh, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, this one being so recent, it's like, ooh, wow.
Right.
I hope, one day there's an update to this and that.
Yeah, you never know. I mean, it's kind of amazing how people can just vanish, but sometimes there are updates years and years later. And
I remember, I think it was a news story we covered. I can't remember if we talked about this on a podcast episode or if it was just on the website. But there was a Pennsylvania woman, a woman from Pittsburgh, actually, from my hometown, who went missing. She was like preaching downtown a lot, like on the street corner, preaching about like the end of times and things like that. And they found her in like Puerto Rico. like
Oh,
30
yeah.
years later, alive in Puerto Rico, but just like totally detached from reality.
Right.
So it's possible, he's still alive. They haven't, like I said, they didn't find a body or anything, but it is certainly a very troubling case.
Yeah, for sure. Anything like this where like there's just no resolution to it.
Right.
It's really disturbing.
Yeah, I imagine that's got to weigh heavy on the parents.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the unknown aspect of it is very like, ugh.
Yeah, like even like Natalie Holloway, where like they never found her body, but at least this guy, he's a liar and everything, but
Right.
did confess to what happened.
Yeah, there's eventually some sort of closure.
Yeah, the not knowing is the worst.
Yeah, hate to. It's like no good way to like transition into the ending spiel here.
Yeah. Well, I guess our next episode is we've done some missing persons lately, but our next episode is gonna be something totally different, and a little bit strange.
Our next episode is going to be very too goofy to a degree.
It's hard to it's not a very succinct idea.
So Netflix is coming out with a documentary soon, so we're going to be talking about what that documentary covers. This guy was an Elvis impersonator from Mississippi, who was he himself was a hardcore conspiracy theorist, and thought he stumbled onto a massive body parts trafficking ring. But then he was arrested for sending deadly ricin to President Obama.
Yeah, such like a weird twist. You're like, oh, okay, what? Goes.
But then it turned out it wasn't him. It was a rival Elvis impersonator who sent it to frame him. So
can't wait to dig into that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know these past two episodes have been a bit of a bummer, but some solace going forward that the next one's gonna be crazy.
Yeah, really wild. And I think that's the last episode of the year.
That'll be the last one of the year. Yeah, because we have a very generous holiday break.
Yes. In the meantime, if you want more stuff from us, of course, you can visit us on the website, allit'sinteresting.com, for reading all the news stories we publish every day. Lots of new stuff. And if you want to sign up for the newsletter, you can do that too. It's at allit'sinteresting.com/sign-up, or you can become a member at allit'sinteresting.com/membership. And with the podcast, you can get a little bonus episode. We're doing History Happy Hour, which we just recorded. So
we just recorded right before this. If we sound tired, it's because we've been podcasting for an hour and a half.
We've been talking, pretty much nonstop.
You can check us out on social media as well, on TikTok at Real History Uncovered, on Instagram at History Uncovered Podcast, on YouTube as well. We have the full episodes and a bunch of shorts available there. And if you like the show and you want more of it, give us a little 5-star rating. Really helps us out on the charts.
Yeah, you can contact us. You can either leave us a voicemail at 929-526-3029, or you can send us an email at podcast@allit'sinteresting.com.
Yes, we love hearing from people. We get episode suggestions and things like that. I think somebody recently on Spotify recommended that we do an episode about the Radium Girl. So we've added that to the calendar.
Yeah, I think it'd be a really interesting episode.
Yeah. So if you're a reader of the website and there's something we've covered on there that you'd like to hear us discuss in more detail on the podcast, write in or call in and let us know. And we do listen to them and we read them all. So
we do, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, for the time being, thanks for listening. We'll see you again in 2 weeks to go over some crazy Elvis
so wild
nonsense.
Story is everything. Yeah.
Be a good one to end the year on, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. A crazy year.
All right. Treat yourselves nice, everybody.
Goodbye.